Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Encounters on the road. There was a Greentext thread on here a while ago with a few stories where someone would be driving on an isolated road and there would be bodies in the road that would get up, more people would emerge. More like this and similar. Personal experiences with shooting at spooky shit.
I've been an over-the-road truck driver for like 2 years now. I haven't seen a single skinwalker in my time, and I've been looking. If I see one, I will absolutely hit it with my truck, but so far no dice.
I've heard of that before. Some criminals from the 70s or 80s. Before cell phones and when people were more trusting. Would pull a move where they'd have a woman laying, unconscious, or in obvious distress on the side of the road hoping someone would stop. People would stop and guys would jump from the ditch or behind some kind of obstruction and kill the people and take the car, or take the car and people and eventually kill them down the road. Creepy shit. I work in the hood sometimes with my work truck and often see scammers trying to wave/flag me down. I never stop, always keep moving.
Be me. Border of Idaho and Washington. Come over a hill and see 2 cars parked on the road blocking both lanes. See a guy waving what looks to be a red hand flag. Slow down, keep my distance, stop about 100 yards back to assess the situation. Guy keeps waving me forward. Instincts are telling me something is up. When the guy realizes that I'm not going to pull forward, he whistles and then pulls out his phone. On the whistle, a guy hiding about 25 yards in front of my car jumps out of a culvert with a bat. Put the car in reverse and start gassing out of there. A black SUV appears behind me. At this point I am now thinking maybe the state troopers had some kind of checkpoint or something. Then realize how stupid that sounds as the SUV turns sideways behind me, blocking my escape. With the Batman running at me, and nowhere for the car to go, I grabbed my Glock 19 and pointed it at the Batman and told him, "I will kill you." Batman dropped the bat, backed up, I gassed the car forward, pointed it at the flagman and said the same thing. I drove halfway into the culvert to get around their roadblock but made it out. Called the cops, explained what happened. Dispatch seemed uninterested. About an hour later a county deputy called asking for details. I explained it to him, and he asked if I could identify them. He sent me a text with their pictures and I told him which one was the flagman, and which one was the Batman, and that I didn't see the SUV driver. Deputy responds, "Got him. Never saw anything in the news about it, never asked to testify."
There's a condemned building on every block of Newark, loads of public housing, that usually have people strung out half dead in the stairwells, gangs selling drugs out of, and just covered in filth. Even the best areas in that city have garbage everywhere and the whole city reeks. Summer is not a pleasant time in Newark. I can't believe I'm unscathed considering what I did, what I looked like, and that I was unarmed and alone every day. Quick story. Be me waiting for the property manager to show up to the house for eviction. Gets there an hour late. Don't have a key or tools to get in. Of course. JPG. Window is unlocked, so slide it up and climb in. The place is covered in grime and dark as F because of sheets over windows. Hello, court officer, anyone home? No response. Search to make sure nobody's there. Open up the bedroom door behind the kitchen to see a female crackhead blowing male crackhead on a moldy mattress in a dark, dingy room. They freak out. Nearly shit pants as the female jumps up and darts out the first floor window. Male yanks his pants up. Sorry boss ad infinitum. Walk past me holding a plastic bag of God knows what and out the front door. Walk outside to see a bewildered property manager as male crackhead takes off down the street, practically Naruto running. Don't come to inner cities in the US, especially in New Jersey.
I'll post one of my ghost encounters. And I pledge that this encounter is entirely truthful and accurate with nothing fictitious, embellished, or aggregate. I was working the night shift from midnight to 8 a.m. back in 2020 as the virus and pandemic panic began. My vacation ended and I recently started my work schedule again around May. My car's alternator failed and stopped working at exactly 2.5 miles from work right before midnight. First, the CD player in my car stopped working. Then the headlights turned off and subsequently the engine shut down. I was able to pull over to the side of the road before the car stopped. At this time, California was still in a lockdown with the pandemic, which meant that only essential workers were allowed to travel back and forth to work. This was also before I bought a cell phone. So I left my car and walked the rest of the way to work in order to call my insurance company and arrange for my car to be towed. I then walked back to my car in the dead of night in order to meet the man in the tow truck, but he never arrived. In the distance, I saw a tall figure standing at attention on the side of the road near my car. The figure appeared to be a man in a police uniform. I smiled and waved at him, hoping to start my conversation with him with a good disposition. I continued to walk quickly towards my car. But then reality set in. First, the alleged police officer had no car. Also, he appeared to be 9 to 12 feet tall. And on a closer look, he had no face and a translucent appearance. I simply made the excuse that this image was merely a creation of the way the streetlights were reflecting upon my car and possibly other nearby objects to create this image of a tall, pale man. Also, if he was a real being of unknown origin, I think he was acting in the capacity of a protector spirit. His presence may have prevented me from getting killed by some other human that night. I glanced at this man a few times as I waited for the tow truck that never arrived, but I tried not to stare and never made an attempt to talk with him. Eventually, I gave up waiting for the tow truck that never arrived and walked back to work. I called my insurance company, and the representative told me that no one was available to tow my car due to the COVID pandemic. After making numerous more phone calls to private towing companies, I was able to get one to meet me at my work location. He quickly drove me to my disabled car right before a female public safety office was going to have my car towed and impounded, at a much greater expense than what I was paying for the other towing service. It was daylight at this time and the ghost had apparently disappeared.
OK/X/. I live in a small but still semi-urban town in Colorado and some strange things have been going on. I am terrible at explaining things and am not a very good artist, so take everything with a grain of salt. It all started a few weeks ago when I was walking to the gas station at around 1:30 a.m. and I heard a rustling in a bush by a dumpster a little off the main road. I brushed it off as there is tons of wildlife in my town until I actually looked over and saw what looked like a very large, almost reptilian armadillo with a fur-covered head and face standing on two legs digging around in the dumpster. Weird, but whatever, it was late and I was a little drunk, so I just went on my way. Nothing else strange happened that night. About a week later I saw another one at around 2 a.m. in my yard out my living room window screwing with my trash can. When I walked over to the window to get a closer look, I kind of bumped into my table and the creature must have gotten spooked and I could sort of see it scurrying off. It ran in an awkward hunch on four legs, but not really, almost a lurch. I've seen the things a couple more times since. They have a similar behavioral pattern to raccoons. I'll leave a drawing of one of the things next to an armadillo for size comparison. Anyways, does anyone know what these things could be or have had similar encounters? Went glamping in the hills in Virginia and heard some weird shit. Drive was 2 hours. After hour 1, no cell service at all. After an hour and 45 minutes, roads are all gravel. Then, 10 minutes before we get there, it's all barely road gravel thrown down for people that just desperately want to live in the mountains. We got an Airbnb of a yurt in someone's backyard. It was great. Yurt was on a raised deck to level it because it was on the side of a hill. Yurt overlooked complete wilderness, no other houses, cabins in sight. Heard a shit ton of coyotes around 6, so we packed it up and went inside the yurt. Cold as shit, so we decided to just get in bed and try to sleep. We slept with our heads closest to the outer portion of the deck, essentially listening over the wilderness in third person. First, we heard something run around, and then circle our yurt. Just off the sound of the footsteps, I think it was deer-sized, but wasn't running frantically like a deer. Next, we hear something walk slowly from the west of our yurt to the east. I think it was something different. As it passes, it encounters a dog on the east, that barks at it constantly, and seemingly walks it all the way back east. I heard 2 pairs of footsteps distinctively, the dog's footsteps and the thing's footsteps. I also heard coyotes directly before I heard this dog, and then directly heard this dog bark. This thing was 100% not a dog, and not a coyote. As the thing is getting backed up, it is sorta barking, sorta howling, but it makes the exact same noise every time. It was super deep voiced, and just went howling 12 times. It got backed up until the dog stayed seemingly on the east side, and then both stopped barking, and then it seems like they went separate ways. Then later something slowly around the yurt, going up one ramp, across the deck, and down the other. Not to be dramatic, but this whole interaction was redlining my prey instincts, and I mouthed to my GF not to make a noise.
This is a story my friend tells. I was only there for the first and last parts. We were camping not too far out of town and decided to go for a walk in the dark, just along the river with the forest at our side. We walk long enough that we realize the trees have slimmed down and we can see the lights up the hill from the road. It's not that late yet, but it's dark and we're getting hungry. But my friend remembers driving by on the way here and he's pretty sure there's a bar or diner or something just along the road. He volunteers to go and get some food and bring it back. We agree to chill and wait for him by the river. After maybe 5 minutes, we hear this horrible screeching and crashing sound, and take off running towards the road. His story: he left us and walked up the little hill towards the road, climbed over the little divider and started walking. He's walking against traffic so he can see if something's coming, but the road's empty. Less than a minute later, he turns a corner and sees a guy just standing by the road. He can see the lights from the diner nearby. He's right next to the guy now. He's pretty short and gaunt, sandy brown hair, wearing a brown jacket and jeans, smoking a cigarette. As my friend makes to walk past him, he just says, "Hold on." Friend turns back to him, not sure he heard him right. He looks around, but there are no cars on the road that he can see, no lights apart from the diner up ahead. He says he didn't feel threatened by the guy despite what he said, so he just smiles and tries to leave again. The dude steps forward and slaps his hand against friend's chest and grabs his shirt. Friend turns to face the dude and gets ready to throw a punch. Suddenly a car comes screeching around the corner, spins a few times and crashes through the divider, wraps around a tree. It broke through maybe 15 feet from where he was standing, and he knows immediately that the driver is dead. The whole driver's seat is crushed. He looks at the guy, who's still grabbing his shirt, and he just gives this little told you look but doesn't say a word. Then the dude just turns around, climbs over the divider and back down into the trees. When we find a friend, he's just standing there, looking at the car. Another friend ran to the diner to call an ambulance. There is no reception, but later they reported that the driver was killed on impact. Friend didn't tell us about any of his side until we were back home. We all put it up to some PTSD at almost being killed. But he swears the guy was there, that he could smell his cigarette and feel his fingernails scratching him as he grabbed his shirt. He can't figure out why he couldn't see or hear the car before it came around the corner. But even if he was just a normal dude that could somehow hear the car when my friend couldn't, if the car had just driven on by him, he'd have been fine. He was on the other side of the road. He would only have been in danger if the car had crashed and he'd kept walking. He asked us a lot if we saw any sign of the guy, but we didn't. This could make sense though because of where we got to the road. He's never had any hallucinations or creepy encounters apart from this, as far as I know.
Not going to Greentext, sorry. Happened in the late 90s. One evening my dad and I went to our local Blockbuster so I could rent some N64 video. To get there we had to drive down the mountain which we lived on to the part of town with the Blockbuster. Anyway, get my games and we start going back. The mountain always scared me a lot as a kid. It was dark, with lots of hiking paths and trees, and pretty spooky. As we're winding up the mountain road, my dad is drilling me on math problems while I stare outside the window impatient to get back and play. Suddenly by the side of the road I see what I think looks like a man, only much bigger. It was only a second or two, but I could swear I had seen what looked like a giant man dressed all in dirty towel rags crouching by a dark inlet just off the side of the road. It freaked me out, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't entirely sure what I actually saw, and since my dad didn't see anything I figured it was just me being a coward. We get back home and I forget all about it. Play GoldenEye and Banjo-Kazooie until about 10 when I get a really bad feeling. The house is quiet except for my television and the sound of my parents watching their movie from their bedroom. I hear what sounded like scuttling running footsteps along the outside wall of the room I'm in. Okay, that's weird. It went towards my parents' room and I heard my mother scream. I stand up and every hair on my body is standing. She screams again and makes Dad yells, "Don't move." I hide under my blanket and suddenly hear the same running steps again, but now back the opposite way to the road in front of our house. And that's when I saw the same shape from the road, but running and practically gliding off the ground. I dropped to the ground as the living room where I was had large windows and I could have easily been seen. I'm practically crying at this point, breathless and have no idea what's happening. Then I saw the black mass disappear. It vanished and I had no idea what just happened. My dad comes out of his room and he has a large knife. He sees me and says, "Go to your room." I ran to my room and passed my mom and saw her crying and smoking a cigarette, which she hardly ever did. I asked her what happened and she started sobbing, "I can't. Go to bed, it's okay, it's fine, good night Anon, don't be frightened." I went to my room and closed the door, hid under the covers and lay awake for a while before I passed out. Maybe not supernatural, not very creepy on paper I guess, but it was one of the scariest nights I've ever experienced. It felt like a terrible nightmare and I still have dreams about that night. Felt like pure evil.
I have posted this story at least 2 times here, one time just recently. This happened a few years ago. I think 2017 to 2018 is very close to where I live, in Germany. Story 1. At about 7 in the evening. Pitch black outside, driving with my car to visit my friend. Driving through a small forest area. That area has quite a lot of dark history and is a strange place. Have to stop at a little parking area there because the cola bottles in my trunk are rolling around like crazy and are about to explode. Get out of the car and fix the problem. The outside air is very heavy and stinky. Close the trunk and suddenly see a deer, about 10 meters in front of me, slowly walking alongside the road in my direction while staring at me with strange-looking eyes, more like eyes of a human, since they had more white in it, and having a posture like a cat about to attack. I jump into my car as quick as I can since the deer is walking in a very strange way. Like a broken machine or something that is wearing a deer costume. It suddenly runs away, still moving around like it has brain damage, when another car appears on the road. Friends just made fun of me when I told them the story 10 minutes later. Story 2. Another night a few months later, driving to my friend again on the same road and at the same time. See a person standing at the side of the road, close to a street light. The parking area is on the other side of the road. As I come closer, I cannot see the person anymore. Instead, there is a deer slowly walking into the road. I do an emergency brake maneuver and the deer just stands there on the road looking at me. It is the same creepy deer and it does the same strange movements again. Another car behind me starts honking and then overtakes me. Deer just walk away back into the forest. I do not know what I saw, but it was not a deer.
Here's some OC. This is a real story. I have pics taken from a video. I won't green text, since I can't do it very well. I live on a farm in a rural part of central Texas. I've had a handful of spooky encounters out here away from civilization. Only one of them was paranormal, though. First, some background. Anybody in the AG business can tell you that wild hogs are a huge problem for farmers and ranchers. They tear massive holes in fences and root up the land something fierce. My cousin and I have been hunting them hard for the past 6 months or so. We found the best time to hunt them is in the morning, but this story takes place at night, around 10 p.m. We were just wrapping up the evening hunt, walking back to the house. It was pitch black, our only light was the green flashlights mounted to our guns. Most animals do not react to green or red lights. Towards the end of a hunt we have a tendency to lower our guard some and chat, since we don't really expect to see any more pigs after a couple hours of blasting them. Tonight was no different. We were walking down a dirt road alongside a fallow field, talking about who knows what. We were speaking in low voices just in case we came up with something. While walking, I heard a barely perceptible tapping noise. It was very soft and quiet, and my initial impression was that it may have been some acorns falling on a log or maybe a woodpecker. I was not too concerned with it. On our right was the field, and coming up on our left as we walked along was an old, run-down deer blind, pick-related. My uncle had built it decades ago. Nobody in their right mind would use it now. As we approached it, both my cousin and I heard the tapping noise again. We stopped talking and became more alert, interested in finding the source of the noise. It wasn't pigs, that was for sure. Right as we walked by the old deer blind, we heard the noise again, much louder this time. It was a distinct knock, knock, knock sound coming from inside the deer blind, as though somebody were rapping their knuckles against the door, asking to be let out, since it was locked from the outside. Adrenaline dumped into my bloodstream as we both swung our rifles around, bathing the deer blind in our green light. We froze, barely breathing, keeping a steady aim on the blind. Again we heard a loud knock 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 from the inside. One of us, I don't remember who, suggested dumping both our ARs into the blind. It was tempting, but shooting at something you cannot see is generally considered to be poor sportsmanship. We sat and listened to the noise for a couple minutes, deciding what to do. The noise came in bursts of 3 and was not regular, which I felt more than likely ruled out an inanimate cause, such as the wind blowing. There was something alive in there. Eventually, I mustered up enough courage to try and peer through the window. I began approaching the blind, phone recording in one hand. If it was a skinwalker, I damn well wanted to be the one to get the first video of it, and rifle with the safety off and ready to fire in the other. As I got closer, the creature inside sensed my approach and began to hiss at me. It was a low, alien-sounding hiss, nothing like a snake or a cat. I was now close enough to touch the blind. I swallowed, and leaned closer to the window, shining my light into the darkness to see the thing. A long and snaky neck uncoiled from the floor and glared at me. The creature's eyes were filled with venom and hate as it continued to hiss angrily. Then, without warning, it moved quickly and again we heard the knocking noise. I suddenly laughed, realizing what I was looking at. It was just a buzzard that had gotten stuck in the blind. Every time he beat his wings, the tips would rap against the plywood walls of the blind. We left the blind and went back home. Sorry for trying to build up the suspense only to reveal such an anticlimactic ending, but it was such a creepy/funny encounter I felt it had merit. Here's the final pick. You can just barely see the buzzard's head.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.